defendant do not hide the facts that are written with the victim's blood. Today you'll learn about those facts. How the victim, Willie James, was bleeding from multiple injuries to his head. How the defendant was covered in blood. And how the defendant caused Willie James injuries by beating him in the head with a large metal flashlight. You'll also hear about the lies. How the defendant lied about even driving that night. How he lied about his use of a deadly weapon. And how he even lied about just owning a flashlight. But the defendant's lies do not hide the facts that were written with blood. Good evening, members of the jury. My name is Stephen Luckie, and I, along with my co-counsel, Monica Bracey, represent the people of the state of Lone Star. The defendant stands before you on the charges of first-degree assault and disorderly conduct, for attacking Willie James with a deadly weapon and for fighting. Today, you'll hear from the victim, Willie James. And this is Willie. He's a hard-working father and husband. He's a war veteran. He served 3 tours in Iraq for our country. He'll get on the stand today and he'll tell you that on October 2nd, 2014, he was having a little bit of a reunion with some of his high school friends. They went to go watch the old football team play, and afterwards, they had a couple of drinks. Though Willie wasn't drunk, he was responsible. So he handed his keys to J.T. Sanborn, the designated driver, who drove them to the 7-Eleven so that they could get a late night bite to eat. While checking out at the 7-Eleven, Willie heard a crash. He turned and saw a bottle of broken tea on the ground, and the defendant standing next to that bottle. He expected that the defendant would have cleaned up the mess, just like he would have done. He felt bad for the employees at the 7-Eleven, so he went up to the defendant and said, "Hey man, you gonna clean up that mess?" But the defendant made it very clear that that was not his job, and he left the store. Now, as Willie and JT began to leave the 7-Eleven, as they began to pull out of their parking spot and exit the parking lot, the defendant's car cut them off, blocking the exit. Willie didn't know what was going on. He gestured for the defendant to move out of the way, but the defendant made a gesture of his own. He flipped him off. So, Willie walked over to the car, said, "What's going on? We're trying to leave." Asked him to move the car, but the defendant just smirked at them. Willie was admittedly frustrated. He just wanted to go home. And though he never hit the defendant, he did hit the car, letting him know, "Come on, it's time to leave." That is when the defendant took out a large metal flashlight and struck Willie James in the head, causing him to fall to the ground. The defendant and Willie wrestled on the ground. And when the police did arrive and they pulled them apart, Willie James had severe injuries, lacerations to his face, and a broken eye socket. The defendant was covered in blood, but didn't have any visible injuries. Willie James was rushed to the hospital, and there was the defendant covered in blood. He never told the police that he had any injuries, and though the EMS were there, he never told them that he had any injuries. He never went to the hospital that night, never went to go see a doctor. Members of the jury, the truth was written with blood. And that is why the defendant stands before you on the charges of first-degree assault and disorderly conduct. We, the state, hold the burden in today's case. The burden of proving all of our elements beyond a reasonable doubt. This is a burden that we embrace. In order to prove first-degree assault, we must prove to you that the defendant acted with the intent to cause serious bodily injury, that he actually caused serious bodily injury, and that he did so through the use of a deadly weapon. In order to prove disorderly conduct, we must show that the defendant intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly fought with Willie James in public. After you've seen the evidence in today's case and heard all the testimony from the witnesses, you'll see this beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, beyond a reasonable doubt does not mean beyond all doubt. It doesn't mean beyond the shadow of doubt. A reasonable doubt is not a possible doubt. It's not a speculative, an imaginary, or a forced doubt. It's a doubt that is truly founded in reason. And at the end of today's case, you'll see that the only reasonable explanation is that the defendant intended to cause Willie James injuries. Today we'll be proving our case through two witnesses. First, we'll be calling the responding officer, Jerry McNulty, to the stand. She'll testify that when she arrived, the defendant wasn't standing behind a car door. He was on the ground wrestling with the victim. And that when she pulled them apart, the victim had serious injuries. And the defendant didn't have any visible injuries, though he was covered in blood. Next, you'll hear from the victim himself, Mr. Willie James. He'll tell you that on the night of October 2nd, 2014, he wasn't trying to get into a fight. He just wanted to go home. And though he tried to reason with the defendant was looking for a fight. The defendant attacked Willie James and caused his injuries. After we've called our own witnesses, the defense will have an opportunity to call witnesses of their own. Now, they don't have to call witnesses, but if they do, just keep one question in mind. What facts are they trying to hide through their lies? At the end of today's case, when you've asked yourself this question and reviewed all the evidence and heard the testimony, you'll see that there's only one reasonable conclusion. Don't allow the defendant to wash away the victim's blood with lies. Find the defendant guilty